Hey, my Legion, how y'all doing today? I'm here today to talk about not really a horror film franchise this time, but like an action, sci-fi slash action says satire franchise called the Death Race films, and it all goes back all the way to 1975 with Roger Corman's Death Race 2000 that Paul Bartel directed. And it was weird the history of this film. I remember when I was in between fifth and sixth grade, we didn't have cable at the old house because back then it was different. I guess my dad said they didn't go out in the country and stuff. So a lot of people out there didn't have cable. We just relied on traditional rabbit ears. So we had like the traditional four channels, plus we had the Canadian channels, which was really cool. And the Canadian was kind of like cable anyways because they had usually showed movies uncut for the most part, at least late night. And I want to remember going on my Uncle Bob's and Aunt Cassie's between 5th and 6th grade, I'm pretty sure. And they had Showtime. And I was looking through and there was a bunch of movies. I saw Death Race 2000. I wanted to see it, but of course I wanted to see it because it's rated R. And I know my Uncle Bob was telling me about it. And it says a very strange movie about like the road race with Frankenstein. Sylvester Stallone's in it and David Carradine's in it. And by that time, Sylvester Stallone was a really established character. I mean, really established actor. Especially with the Rocky movies, right? And what this is set in a futuristic society, and they had like this giant race broadcast internationally like once a year. And it had like a few characters. Sylvester Stallone was Machine Gun Joe Perturbo, and David Carradine were Frankenstein. Those are the two main characters, and they had other characters, including like what's that, Natilda the Hun, and some other goofy characters, two females, including Martin Cove was one of the and now including one female, including a very sexy what's her name now? My mind is gone. That one girl that played in Eating Raoul. Warrenoff. Yeah. It's very sexy one. And it was a very entertaining film. I really enjoyed it, and what this boiled down to, what Intercontinental race that broadcast around the world in the year 2000, like Conan O'Brien would say, futuristic society, and the players would have to run down pedestrians when they get a certain amount of points depending on who it was. And it's a very satirical look and very funny and very entertaining film that Paul Bartel directed. And I've seen some other movies that Paul Bartel directed, including his classic Eating Raoul. And then Lust in the Dust, which no one ever talks about, his Western. I did see all of his films, though, but I've seen a few. He's only did a handful. And I really enjoyed it. That gets a full-on 10 out of 10. Now, fast forward to the time when Hollywood's doing so many remakes of so many movies. In 2008, they did it's just called Death Race this time with Jason Statham. And basically this goes to a prison called Terminal Island. And Terminal Island, in fact, is an old movie, like a survivalist prison film on this one island. And Tom Selleck was in this from the early 70s. I watched that with my dad on YouTube, and we enjoyed it. I think my dad may have thought it was a little silly. I mean, it's very low budget, but silly, but it is enjoyable. And that was like a 9 out of 10. But this one involves this prison, and then Jason Statham, gets arrested, and then they have like this big death race, and the one warden played by Joan Allen wants him to play Frankenstein, don the mask and stuff like that, and he finally does that. And in this one, it's still entertaining, but this one you just try to kill the other people in the race, and whoever wins and stuff like that eventually gets their freedom. And I did like the first Death Race. I thought that was very entertaining with Jason Statham, the remake. But I mean, nowhere near as good as the Paul Bartel one. That gets probably an 8 out of 10. Now on to Death Race 2, which I saw on Netflix. This movie really sucked. It had a guy that looked like Jason Statham, and they started out with this thing called Death Match. And eventually, way down the line, like an hour into it, the girl said, "Why don't we start doing a Death Race?" And it was about like this TV corporation that was in cahoots with they own the prison and stuff like that, and they were doing this for ratings and money and stuff like that, putting on this national thing to the death, and like if you win 5 races you get your freedom. It really sucked. It took forever to get to any story. It was boring. Danny Trejo was in it, and he had some of the most interesting lines. I mean, it was so much setting up the story. And finally, when they got Death Race, the movie was close to being over with, and then they established a Frankenstein character. They completely did like a different idea, and it just really sucked. I give that a 3 out of 10, and it had like what I call sunset syndrome, because it took I watched bits and pieces of it throughout the week till I was finally done with it, because the movie Sunset was an old Blake Edwards film with Bruce Willis and James Garner, and it's supposed to be two like silent era people reuniting and stuff like that. It's supposed to be a comedy. I always wanted to see it because I saw so many trailers when I was in the army. When I was in Germany, my friend let me borrow it, and it took me about 2 weeks to watch the whole thing. I watched like 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I wanted to see it, but it was just so damn boring and not funny at all. That movie really sucked. So I was very disappointed with that. Now on to Death Race 3 Inferno, which is also on Netflix. Now this one has a lot of same problems, and at least Frankenstein character is established, and still that guy looks like Jason Statham, but not him. Danny Trejo's in, and like the same characters that were in the first one, except Ving Rhames is not in this. In this one, they had like this entrepreneur, supposed to be like a Branson Mark. That guy who owns Virgin Airlines type, and man, is he boring. And he wants to take Death Race Global to like Africa. So I give them credit for at least putting it in a different location, a different prison. The locales are pretty neat. At least Universal's behind it, so it has somewhat of a budget. I thought it was a little bit better than Death Race 2, but I mean, still the main villains, like the girl hosting the race and Entrepreneur, are incredibly boring. The race scenes are okay, but not great. And it's kind of a disappointment too. I give that probably 5.5 out of 10. I mean, but as far as I'm concerned, you can stick with Death Race 2000, and that's on YouTube. The Jason Statham one's alright, but Death Race 2000 is the way to go. And that's my complete thoughts and history and reviews of the Death Race franchise. A little bit something a little bit different, an action, sci-fi type action, but mostly sci-fi from the Roger Corman one, which is superior to any of the other ones. And so until next time, bye, please. Take care, my liege. I think it's time to get out of the heat. Something more to eat.